Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, with the Bills have a new head coach. We know who the offensive and defensive and special teams coordinator is, if you care about special teams. How are you doing?
Doing good. It's fun to now that we're in off season, although it would be nicer if we were doing Super Bowl prep right now, but it's nice that since we're in our off season form here and we're talking about coaching stuff, that we're able to sit down, Josh, during daytime hours and just kind of have nice, relaxed conversations about the Bills in the future and things like that as the NFL season winds down to its completion. I'm doing good here on this. What is this now officially Sunday early afternoon?
We have made it to February. It goes by quick. I need it to go by a little quicker, so it's football season soon, but we'll have free agency and the draft to tide us over when they get here, but we do have to get through this Super Bowl. Let's go Seahawks. All right. Luka, we did a live show on Wednesday. Reacting to the Joe Brady hire. At the time, we kicked around the idea of just posting the live show as our podcast for this week, because really the only thing we knew that was coming up was the press conference on Thursday. We did mention Jim Leonhard and Pete Carmichael in our episode because I think those were names that were linked to the Bills, Leonhard specifically. But because of the fallout from the press conference and because of the fact that we do have, now we know, offensive and defensive and special teams coordinators, we felt like it would be a good idea to put out a fresh episode, which is going to be our plan throughout the off season. Is, for the most part, make sure we're still hitting one podcast episode a week. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, there might be some dead periods, particularly in the summer where it doesn't make a lot of sense. But right now, Bills news is still flooding in. All right. Well, on Wednesday, if you missed the live show, Luka and I were very much like a lot of Bills fans. We were kind of on the Joe Brady hire. We got it. We understand it. We went through a long list of reasons why, when you just look at his resume, Joe Brady was as qualified, if not more qualified, than any of the candidates. But it just was familiar. It was familiar, and that's where the Bills have been living in the McBean era, in the familiar, whether it's getting free agents off the street like Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips, whether it's promoting from within, Ken Dorsey and Joe Brady, familiar. Now that we have seen the press conference, and now that we have seen the vision, at least so far with the coordinators, how do you feel right now, Luka, about the Joe Brady hire?
I will say I feel better-ish about the Joe Brady hire. I think it has to do more so with how things came off following the presser, following his appearance on McAfee, on Rich Eisen. A lot of what we were hearing from Joe Brady felt, and this is how I feel about just people in general and just how I handle, who I I care about when and view in a positive light rather than negative or whatever it is. Very genuine individual, very self-aware individual. It feels like there's definitely this attitude about him that's hungry when it comes to the professional side of things, but also recognizing, since he had been in house and he somewhat openly reflected on it, that things needed to change internally, whether it's about the message, the environment, kind of the day-to-day vibes, we'll just call it. And that's cool. I'm all for that. And I love hearing kind of not just typical coach speak, not just typical football jargon. Like, there was a little bit of a personability about him that I enjoyed through his messaging, both in press conferences and then, of course, in the more relaxed, we'll call it, appearances that we saw on the other the national shows, being McAfee and Eisen. But what I will say too is we'll get into the coordinator hires, a little bit of a mixed signal in that regard, based on connecting what his words were and kind of when the media poked him about what is his vision at the moment, what direction does he want to go with his coaching hires, things of that nature, and then the actual answers we have seen. There's something to love about it when it comes to Jim Leonhard being hired specifically. I think there's just so many positives about that hire that I'm over the moon, it feels like, about that one. But then also when it comes to like the offensive coordinator hire and Pete Carmichael, it it doesn't fully conflict his messaging, but at the same time, it definitely left me scratching my head in the sense of you told us you want, X, Y, and Z. You want different voices in the room, not necessarily conflicting opinions in the sense of like in a negative fashion, but someone that's not just yes people. That was absolutely said. And then you go and hire what feels to be a very good friend in coaching circles, someone that you worked with back in your Saints days under Sean Payton, someone that is very similar in offensive philosophy and stuff, which has its positives too, which is why I'm not fully against it. But it was your first hire, and your message was, I want different characters and different voices and things like that. And then all of a sudden, you in turn go and hire probably one of the more familiar voices to you. Maybe not obviously in the Bills organization, but in your NFL or coaching career, I'm sure Pete Carmichael and him have kept in touch, of course, and I'm sure they bounce things off each other, and they've been in similar rooms that it's like, okay, I mean, I get it, but also, is this going to be truly a, again, healthy environment of conflict and game planning and things like that? Or are you both just going to be so much on the same page that you might be blinded by things that need to be focused on, detailed on, stuff of that? And it does become a little bit more of a yes man environment from the offensive side of the ball. That will be something we'll have to now evaluate as we get into the next season, and we have plenty of time before then. But overall, I will say from our live show to now, I definitely am in a more positive mindset with the Joe Brady hire. I think a level head has come about with that. I'm still a little frustrated about the process that they led into it. But overall, now that we're starting to see results and things similar to like the Jim Leonhard hire, the potential link for even other coaches that could be coming in underneath him as a positional coach, stuff like that. There's definitely some hope and optimism when it comes to new voices in the room and maybe a reinvigorated coaching staff being able to elevate things out of a lot of disappointing performances we've seen of late of the product on the field.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about both Leonard and Carmichael, what we think that means for those sides of the ball, what we think it means for Brady later on in this episode. But I do hear a lot of your concerns about Pete Carmichael. I want to talk about the press conference specifically. I had a couple of takeaways from it. One, you can tell how important this job was to Joe Brady, and I get it. It's an introductory press conference. All of these are meant to feel like, oh, this is exactly where I want to coach. If I could pick one job, it would be this job. Whoever gets, I mean, Todd Monken got hired by the Cleveland Browns. I'm sure that's what he's going to say in his press conference if he's still has to have it. I don't know. But you could just tell the emotion that came over Joe Brady when he was talking about his wife and talking about his players and talking about coaching a game in Pittsburgh the day his daughter was born. His child, I'm assuming daughter there. The day his child was born. How emotional he got when talking about Josh Allen and empowering Josh Allen. I thought he aced the press conference. It's hard to fail these press conferences, but I thought he did a really good job. And one of my favorite things that Joe Brady did is he shouted out Sean McDermott. And not just in a passive, I learned from McDermott, I think him, like he really took time to talk about what McDermott meant to his career arc, what he learned from McDermott, how he's taking over the Bills in much better condition than what McDermott did in 2017, recognizing the challenge and expectations, but also recognizing that McDermott really did change the status of the program. I thought if I were going to be harsh on Pagula and Bean, I thought that was a missed note that both of them had a chance to do over their chances talking. And I was proud of Joe Brady to do that because given the pecking order as we understand it with Pagula, then Bean, then Brady, that to me felt like a power move by Brady. Not like I'm taking power away from you guys, but no, Sean McDermott absolutely means a lot to me. I'm the head football coach of this team. I'm going to mention him. And I thought it was really cool to see because I would have understood it if it had been a little more passive.
It's all class. It's recognizing both how he was able to be in the position that he is now, being the head coach, but also I do love the singular point that you brought up where he fully recognized the unique nature or unique-ish nature of this, where most of the time someone going into a new head coaching position is inheriting something that is needing work. It needs to be rebuilt. It needs to be restructured as to getting back to winning ways. Whereas you have a rare thing going on right now that is, this is a an MVP quarterback, best player in the world led team that, let's not misconstrue it for what it is, made another divisional round and just came up short. This team has the longest consecutive playoff run currently in the NFL. This team has had a lot of levels of success to it that then felt like it still needed to move on to finally get over that hump. It's a rare opportunity that gets presented on the coaching circuit. So for Brady, as you said, in front of Pagula and Bean, to take that moment to truly recognize and acknowledge and give the flowers that felt deserved to McDermott, because it's, you know, it's not like McDermott means nothing to how he got in that position in the first place, and acknowledging that and respecting it. And then also on top of it, you know, seeing it for what it is, and both crediting how the Bills are in the position that they are right now, but then recognizing maybe how it couldn't, you know, it wasn't getting better, and he hopes to be the man that can continue the success. I think it was definitely a great showing from him on how he towed that fine line and kind of killed it in the sense of moving it along, acknowledging the past by also recognizing the future that he now needs to lead the charge on and be responsible for, to get over that hump that this organization, his ownership, and everyone wants to see him do and get and achieve. So I respect a lot on how Joe Brady handled, you know, the McDermott aspect of everything, the team, and how they got to the position that they are in hiring him, and how much it means to him both to be in that moment there, but then recognize what the job at hand for him is moving forward.
One other thing I really liked about Brady's press conference was he hit the note of, I'm not an offensive head coach, I'm a head coach. And he brought this up on McAfee. He can't wait to celebrate with the defensive players after Josh Allen throws an interception, or in his words, quote unquote, talk shit to the offensive tackles. And I think that's important. I think there's definitely an aspect of, when your head coach comes from the background on one side of the ball, it can leave the other side of the ball, feeling like lesser than in his mind. And you can tell Joe Brady, the term CEO was thrown around so much this week, and he said it at his press conferences, offensive background, but I'm the head coach of this team, and I think that's important. And I thought that was a good note on his part. The one, I don't want to say I took issue with this, but I think the one thing that raised my antenna a little bit, and I thought Tim Graham did a good job pointing this out on his podcast too. There was a lot of Joe Brady going out of his way to talk up Josh Allen, and talking about how important Josh Allen is to him, and how everything they do is for Josh Allen. And look, people in my life that know me will think it's hilarious that I'm criticizing somebody for quote unquote glazing Josh Allen, because it's almost a running joke with people that I know of how much I just am obsessed with him from a, favorite pro athlete standpoint. But the head football coach of a football team glazing a player like that is a little strange. It might be a new age way of coaching, but I also am concerned, understanding that Josh Allen still is the most important person in that building because of his status, the position he plays, etc., that tough love is necessary from a head coach. And when I hear Joe Brady talking up Josh Allen, when I hear him saying that every decision he makes is going to come with Josh Allen in mind, there are times, Luka, when head coaches have to be the adult in the room. It's 4th and 4. You have a 10-point lead, and Josh Allen just threw an incomplete pass on 3rd down, and he's coming off the sideline screaming, saying, let's go for it. Can you be mature enough in that moment to look at your franchise quarterback that you're building this all for and say, no, I'm punting? Sean McDermott could. Head coaches have to do that. And that's just one example, but I don't want to say it's concerning but I think it's at least noteworthy how much Bean and then how much Brady went out of their way to talk about their love of Josh Allen and how much they're prioritizing him.
It's one of the things that I like, raising the alarms, raising the red flag. I'd call it a orange flag, a yellow flag, a cautious flag. The message was he didn't have say in things. And he even on McAfee, I think also mentioned it somewhere else. Maybe it was in the presser that followed up from the Brady one, where he also revealed that he was dealing with a small fracture in his foot and still yet played through it. Incredible stuff. Um, the the message was Josh Allen didn't have a say in things. He didn't, he even said it that he did not have kind of any sort of legitimate pull to the hiring. He didn't get Joe Brady the job kind of deal. But then for, Bean and Brady to sit there and absolutely pedestal Josh Allen and essentially recognize that they're in the positions they are because of 17 success. That's conflicting to me. That feels it feels the entire Brady segment, thanking his wife, his kids, thanking Sean McDermott, thanking Josh Allen included in this. It was Oscar thanks territory level of emotions. And you do all the things you do. You thank the higher powers for putting you in the position that you are. You thank the people closest to you that put you in the position that you are. That's what those speeches are for. And you're sitting there including Josh Allen, somewhat rightfully so, of course, because Josh Allen is who you have hitched your wagon to of recent that is allowing you to do the things and be in the positions that you are. But also it gets to a point where did Josh Allen truly not have much of a say in this? Did Josh Allen not pull any punches in the questionings that you wanted to outright highlight when you were making these appearances? Or did Josh Allen truly have some leeway in this decision making? Did Josh Allen want his buddy still to be there? Because then, as you pointed out, that head coach is going to be, it's not will they be, eventually they will be in a tough position where they need to tell 17, no, we are not going for it. We are settling for the field goal here. We are punting here. The game is telling us to do this, and it's going against your desire, Josh Allen, to do otherwise. You have to have that ability. You cannot blink. You cannot deliberate it. You cannot. It is your responsibility as the head coach to make those difficult decisions and have to be able to trust them as you yourself makes that decision. This is not something that you can then bounce off Josh Allen and be like, are you really feeling good about going for it here? Or, what are your thoughts on this? Or why do you think we should be going for it here rather than punting it? It's like, no, that's the head coach's job. That is you. The head coach is there to do everything they are doing in the best interest of the team. The team. And Josh Allen, as great as he is, as competitive as he is, can be blinded by his own greatness at times, as any great player would be, and be thinking about what they are capable of rather than what is in best interest for the team in that game, in that moment, and things like that. And I want Josh Allen to live in that space. I want Josh Allen to believe he can always do the best things he can do, but the head coach needs to be the overriding, hey, this is what we need to get accomplished in this game to get it over the line for us to win and move on to the next week in a better position than where we lay. Sometimes that may not be on your shoulder, 17. We need to move forward this way. The glazing of all of that does kind of conflict the message of Josh was not part of the Brady hiring at all. Or, and some part of it is fine, but like, was he truly a deciding factor in it? What level was he a deciding factor? It felt a little bit contradictory to all of that messaging that he wasn't a major key component to Brady being hired, being retained, whatever. It's to thank him as much as they did. That it doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth. It just leaves questions there as to what truly, where's the truth in all of this?
I thought Bean's explanation of Josh Allen's role was interesting, and Bean is usually pretty much of a straight shooter in these settings. So I do take what he says to heart. I think Josh Allen was pretty much in that room to rule out people. If he felt, because who has a better pulse on the locker room than Josh Allen? And if somebody is in there, and it doesn't have to be anybody, like Anthony Lynn, anybody you want to say, um, is in front of in that interview process and just says two or three things, and Josh Allen's like, yeah, that's not going to go over well in our room. That's the stuff that Bean wanted to know. And I also think that Josh Allen was there just to ask follow-up questions, things that he was not sure about, whether it's lingo or how we call plays or priorities. There's so much that goes into being a head coach that we don't even think about. Being talked about, like strategizing your day. Do you eat before or after practice? Do you practice in the morning or in the evening? Things like that as fans, we just kind of take for granted, but really is the whole CEO mindset. And that's where I want to transition now into the Pete Carmichael hiring, Luka, because I know a lot of people heard that Joe Brady's going to be calling plays, and it's like, oh, well, then it doesn't really matter who the offensive coordinator is. I understand why you would think that, but there's so much on the head coach's plate. I thought Todd Haley, I saw an interview with him from a couple years ago where he's been in this role uniquely, both as a head coach who called plays, I want to say maybe in Kansas City, and also as an offensive coordinator who called plays, maybe in Arizona. Who would have been the head coach in Arizona at that time? Wisenhunt, under Wisenhunt, and then also as an offensive coordinator who didn't call plays, and that would have been in Cleveland. I can't remember what the name of the coach there, but that doesn't matter. But he's had all the experience. The head coach has so much on their plate. One, they have to devise, like, what is our overall overarching game plan for the week? They have media obligations. They have to meet with the training staff to figure out where my players' health is for the week. They have to meet with the training staff. I mean, we saw this bite the Bills 2 years ago. If you have a London trip coming up, what does our sports science staff recommend on travel and things like that? He's going to be in special teams meetings. He's going to be in defensive meetings. He's going to be out there at practice overseeing everything. So while, yes, on game day, when the game plan is developed, he's going to be the one calling plays. But it's, in this case, Pete Carmichael or the offensive coordinator's job to develop the game plan throughout the week, to create the script, and then obviously by the end of the week, run it by the head coach for checks and balances, see what Brady likes, what he doesn't like, but formulate the game plan. So while Pete Carmichael isn't the one talking directly into Josh Allen's headset on Sundays, Pete Carmichael is going to do about 80% of the legwork in developing the plan through the vision of what Joe Brady outlined for the week. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Also keeping in mind that last year, Joe Brady was calling plays for Sean McDermott. So anytime he had to develop a game plan, he had to do so under the umbrella of what Sean McDermott wanted the game plan to be that week. That is where I come away liking the Pete Carmichael hire. One, he has extensive experience with Sean Payton. Sean Payton's name came up a lot in this press conference, by the way. Joe Brady went out of his way to tell you he was on the Sean Payton tree.
Yeah.
But 20 seasons in the NFL working with Sean Payton. Sean Payton has always called the plays, but Pete Carmichael has been there as his right-hand man, helping him formulate the actual game plan. And I also think that if this is the direction, whether it's Joe Brady mentioning Sean Payton multiple times in his press conference, that this Bills offense is going to go, well, who better to have as the second set of eyes, the guy to develop the plan, than a guy who's been right by Sean Payton the whole time? I do think if they are trying to develop a Sean Payton offense, there's an optimistic point of view that I can take about this from a wide receiver standpoint. We'll get into that next. But Luka, when I look at it through that lens, I would have preferred to have my cake and eat it too and have somebody on the staff with head coaching experience. You didn't check that box here. But as far as having somebody that understands what Brady's wanting to do under the umbrella of what Sean Payton would do, I think Pete Carmichael just makes too much sense, even though it wasn't a wow, what a home run hire of an offensive coordinator.
The message will not be lost on the day to day whenever Joe Brady is not capable of installing offenses, on making sure everyone understands what the vision is on game days, whatever it is, the game plan, the meetings, everything like that. Carmichael will absolutely be in sync and understanding as to um, what Joe Brady's true vision is as to what they're wanting on the day to day. As you mentioned it, Joe Brady is in, whether it's pressers, whether it's your weekly meetings, outside of the offensive installments, whatever. So from that aspect of everything, I like it. I also have a little bit of pause. He was the right-hand man of Sean Payton for effectively all these years, going back to 2006 when he was brought onto the Saints staff as a quarterbacks coach. 2007 is when he was promoted to a pass game coordinator. And then 2009 is when he was made the offensive coordinator, all the way through 2023 for the Saints, when he was then fired after that season. Why 2023 is so noteworthy is because Sean Payton wasn't there after the 2021 season. So there were 2 years there that he wasn't attached. Then he goes to the Broncos as an offensive assistant to rejoin his buddy Sean Payton. So there was a time that he was play calling a little bit there in New Orleans. It's not exactly fair to judge him too much on it. Those aren't 2022 and 2023 aren't exactly noteworthy times for the New Orleans Saints. They didn't exactly have a wealth of offensive weapons, and Drew Brees was not there anymore. And you're rolling through with Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, and you're eating W's sometimes.
Was Derek Carr there at one point?
Derek Carr might have been the 23 season.
I know they were very happy when Clint Kubiak showed up, and that is your larger point.
Yeah. Yes. I am concerned if play calling duties have to then lean on Carmichael. Mm-hmm. That is where my concern is. He was never, to my knowledge, and to I believe most, Sean Payton has been very successful play calling, and that is why he's in the position that he is. That is why he is regarded the way that he is. This individual has not been asked to do things of that nature. It's one of those things where I hope everything is successful with Joe Brady as being a play caller and head coach. But if it becomes too much, you need your head coach to still remain the head coach and be the CEO and do everything you need him to do on the day-to-day as well as game days. And if the play calling dynamic becomes too much for him, he will have to pass that along to a Carmichael so that he can focus on the head coaching responsibilities that he has. That's then also where I'm not overly concerned, but it's like, okay, Carmichael, you haven't really shown your capabilities of, doing the thing that you need to in the past. Now you need to do it with Josh Allen. You do have that premier quarterback and what hopefully is a better offense to do the things you need to. Joe Brady can't do this anymore when he had been doing it successfully in years past. Are you going to be capable of doing it now on the fly effectively? A little bit of question marks and concerns there. It's just enough to put a little bit of pause on it for me to think it's a great one. The single-mindedness that Joe Brady and Carmichael will have on the day-to-day, the week-to-week, is absolutely a very big net positive. It's something you need. You need to make sure your offensive coordinator is not combative with what the play caller's wanting, and that being your head coach. And the fact that, as again, circling back to it, if he's having discussions with his training staff, Joe Brady, that is, as to where everything stands, if he's trying to meet even with Bean on pro scouting decisions, where are we at when it comes to roster moves, what's down the pipeline because of injury things that are going on, whatever it is, Brady's going to have a lot on his plate. You need that guy who's in the offensive, meeting rooms and in positional meeting rooms and whatever it is, still delivering the same message and understanding to them, so that when then you circle back and you have Joe Brady doing his things during practices and or on game days, it's not confusing. It doesn't feel conflictive. You're not having to take a step back to be, wait, no, Carmichael was kind of delivering this message, Joe. Why are we now all of a sudden doing this? That feels like something that should never happen. And that's absolutely a big piece and, proponent to what Pete Carmichael's game is going to be about and responsibility. So I'm all for it. I think all in all, it's a it's a safe option at offensive coordinator.
Mhm.
That's what it is. I think your point two, where no head coaching experience, things like that, someone who can truly understand and put themselves in the shoes of Joe Brady, that would be a really nice thing to have there. It would be a nice thing to have in house, because then now we'll discuss soon here about the defensive coordinator side of stuff. You don't have it coming from there as well. So that's one where Carmichael can at least stand there and be like, I had been working with Sean Payton, someone who had been in your shoes, Joe, as a play caller and head coach, but he himself can't say he can lean on experience from being in that position himself. And, both from a play caller for the most part, but even more importantly, as a head coach, that you're, if you're Joe Brady, you're truly depending on or trusting in yourself that you will be capable of taking on this entire responsibility from day one. And I love the confidence if that's the case, but you don't know what you know until you're in it. And
Mhm.
that's where maybe a little bit more experience sitting there around you would be better, because then you're building in that crutch that is, hey, you can lean a little bit more responsibility on these guys who have been there for you, so you can focus on doing the best job you can as the head coach.
Yeah, and I saw somebody, I can't remember who said it, but somebody on X said that Pete Carmichael to Joe Brady is what Leslie Frazier was to Sean McDermott, and that is basically, he's gonna carry your message in the room whenever
Yeah.
you're not in the room. It's a safe choice, I get it, and in a lot of ways, going to what some of the stuff Luka said, it's Joe Brady betting on himself. There's no real tag out option as far as you calling the plays, because even if he tags in Pete Carmichael, he's going to be calling Joe Brady's plays. That's fine. He's betting on himself. Ultimately, would I love to see more head coach experience on the staff? Yes. Perhaps we still get that. It could come in the form of quarterback coach. It could come in the form of just a created position, offensive assistant.
Yeah.
I would love to see Joe Brady have a sounding board with somebody on the staff who has head coaching experience. Luka, did you know that Jim Leonhard has head coaching experience? I didn't.
I actually did. Yes. I mean, it's obviously a little bit in the weeds as to
Mhm.
where it comes from, but yes, I was aware of that one blip in time in his coaching career where he was under the label of blank head coach.
Yeah, interim head coach at the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I think this is the hire that maybe even more so than Joe Brady got Bills fans back on the bandwagon, so to speak.
Yes.
Jim Leonhard, defensive assistant from the Denver Broncos, is officially the Bills' defensive coordinator. We talked about this on Wednesday's show. There were rumblings the Bills were targeting him. Other teams like the Chargers and the Cowboys and the Ravens were targeting him too. But one thing that made the Bills stand out in those scenarios were we knew he would be able to call plays in Buffalo. That was not going to be the case for the Ravens, who hired a defensive head coach and mentor. Luka, to me, this is an absolute breath of fresh air. There's so much to like about it. And this is no disrespect to anything Sean McDermott did while he was here. But one of my and your biggest points of contention with Sean McDermott was how long it took new players to assimilate to the scheme. And how many times did we see a rookie player come in, Terrell Bernard, look absolutely lost to the point where that offseason we were like, we can't factor this guy into anything moving forward. And then the next year he takes a step. Dorian Williams, similar path, went from, holy cow, this guy can't be trusted on the field to, oh, he's a pretty high end backup for this team. I think there's a chance that if McDermott had stayed, we would see a similar trajectory for TJ Sanders. Cole Bishop took a massive leap in year two after looking unplayable down the stretch last year for the Bills. My biggest issue with the McDermott defense was how taxing it was mentally on the players in the scheme. And this isn't to say that Jim Leonhard's scheme or other schemes require you to be dumb, but there is something about think less and play fast. And there's going to be complexities in the defensive scheme that Jim Leonhard brings, but they're not going to be such a barrier to the point where the Bills have to go out and find for lack of a better term, washed up versions of Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson and Balen Spector and AJ Klein and Josh Norman off the street and Dane Jackson off the street to plug holes, you can count on these day 3 rookies from being ramped up from training camp to fill these holes. And we're going to talk about a lot. We're going to talk about going from a 4-3 to a 3-4. How much does that really matter in 2025? We're going to talk about which players fit, which players don't fit. But at the very core of this conversation, Luka, I am super excited about the fact that players can succeed in Jim Leonhard's scheme without having years of familiarity with it. They can just come in and play football.
I think I've said it a few times this season during our shows where football is a simple sport. You don't need to overcomplicate it. And it feels like what we're going to get out of a Jim Leonhard defense is do the simple things great rather than being complex to a point where you really need, when you are at full health, clicking on all cylinders, you are an unstoppable force, but also a couple injuries here and there, a couple things aren't going your way. You, like you said, you know, you need to rehash guys to come in to fill those gaps because you are, I don't want to say overcomplicating it because Sean McDermott absolutely did things that were respected and disguised things really well and stuff. And it's not even saying Jim Leonhard won't disguise defenses at all. That then should be easily pick upable, but you overcomplicate things for your guys in house that mistakes are easier to be made. And, you know, overcorrections and things of that nature lead to poor results and just what we saw this season out of that Falcons game and or the Dolphins game and stuff like that, where when it rains, it pours, and when things aren't going well and you're trying to adjust on the fly and overcorrect things, it just all goes awry. And you just, there's too much going on that you can't pull a Jordan Hancock off the bench and just expect him to be able to pick up because it's too much for him to process in year one. It's, I very much look forward to, you know, this new philosophy and something on the defensive side of the ball that will feel like a true overhaul, fresh start, and a much more aggressive approach that also then will simplify things on the back end or just allow you to truly trust the job that you need to do. And as you said, think less, think fast. You know, it's do things quicker because you have less to be concerned about. And again, it's not due to it being overly simple and dumb and the fact of anyone with a brain in the football world will eventually be able to pick up on it with ease and whatnot. You don't, what's the way to say this? You don't get where you are as a Jim Leonhard and a Vance Joseph and have an extensive, respected career doing what you do because it's so simple that anyone can pick up on it. It's just you seem to allow to get the most out of guys by doing the simple things. And as you said, like we'll talk about the transition over and stuff, but it even gets you excited for guys that you felt like athletically you should be able to get more out of, but then it's just not clicking for them in a McDermott defense, i.e. Dorian Williams. And now all of a sudden you bring in a Jim Leonhard and this defensive philosophy that feels like he absolutely could soar in. And maybe this is exactly how you get even more out of a guy in house that could hit the ground running for you in a successful way to elevate the defense that, let's be honest, always leaves you wanting more and seems to always come up short in the big moments. If we can just be more aggressive and rush the passer better and just be able to defend the run more and force you to make the right decision time and time again quickly, this is maybe where the direction it could make a lot of sense. And I am all for this drastic change to the defense to maybe finally crack the code as to making a few stops in those big moments, getting the results you want from a defensive side where it doesn't have to be all on the offense to be perfect drive after drive. The defense will be able to step up and create plays in the playoffs to get you over the line and over the hump.
So I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about, okay, if we're shifting from a 4-3 to a 3-4, who fits, who doesn't fit, where do they fit? The first thing I would say is I think there's a lot of outdated ideologies on the difference between the two schemes where I think as generically as I can possibly say, I think a lot of people think of 4-3 as single gap scheme, 3-4 as two gap scheme, and that's just not the case. The other thing I will say, and this is a point I brought up on Twitter yesterday, Luka, and I want to see if you agree. I'm not sure if you saw this or not, but I don't think Brandon Beane would have signed off on a defensive coordinator change unless Brady and Beane already had a vision for how to use these 7 players.
Yes.
These 7 players based on whether either investment contract wise or career trajectory based on last year, I think would be non-starters if Joe Brady said, okay, I can get this guy as defensive coordinator, but I'm really not sure where this guy fits. Everybody else, fit in where you fit in. If you don't fit in, we'll get you out of here. But here's the 7 players that I think would be non-starters for Beane if they didn't fit. Gregory Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Christian Benford, Maxwell Harrison, Cole Bishop, TJ Sanders, Deion Walker. All for a variety of reasons. Benford and Rousseau recently paid, I think thought of as core players going forward. I did not mention Terrell Bernard. I can get into that if you'd like me to. The draft class from last year, I did not mention Landon Jackson, even though he was drafted ahead of Deion Walker. Perhaps you want to include Landon Jackson in this. I just wasn't sure what to do with him because his season was cut short. I have not given up on Landon Jackson at all. This might be a great scheme for him, quite honestly. But I just don't think that would be a deal breaker for them. But the season Deion Walker and Cole Bishop had, where they were both in Cole Bishop's sake, conversation for the Pro Bowl, Deion Walker, first team, all rookie teams everywhere. TJ Sanders, the aggressive move they made to trade up and get him in the second round. Obviously, Maxwell Harrison, last year's first round pick, looks to be kind of a fit for all schemes kind of player anyway. Those are the 7 players I came up with. Do you have A, any players you would add to the list, or B, that you would remove from my list?
I don't have anyone I would add, nor do I think, TJ Sanders, I would say, is a stretch, but also I see it. I can understand it. Absolutely. Look, you moved up on day 2 to get him in the first place. You obviously like a lot about his game, and maybe even on top of it all, the caveat is you really weren't caring for how he was being utilized during that stretch of the season where it felt like he was a liability more than someone you could depend on time and time again. And that's less to do about the player, more about, again, where he was being positioned. So there is a discussion to be had there where you maybe want to see your return on investment be better than what it was with TJ Sanders. So I can see that. I don't think Bernard's in this conversation. I think, did you extend him or sign him to an extension to basically have the remainder of his prime here? Yes. Do you need to hitch your horse to it as much as it feels like that because of it? No. I think his contract is easily workaroundable. For instance, this season, his cap hit is 5.4 mil. That is nothing to be concerned about. And then next season, it will be 11 mil before you can absolutely get out of it. Mm-hmm. And that is where I go, yeah, you will try to make it. There's enough about Terrell Bernard's game that you've seen in a positive light that it's like, can we get something out of him? Yes, potentially. Does he feel athletic enough to maybe still be useful in this defense? Absolutely. But you don't have to sit there and feel as if you need to make it work. No. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Go out there and sign a free agent that could absolutely fill the void that is what Terrell Bernard is, putting there in front of you, and you will just deal with the number that you have him on until you can finally get out of it. The best part about Terrell Bernard is the contract he sits on. It is not anything that feels like it's weighing you down. The one thing that will quote unquote weigh you down is that 11 mil number for one season. But even when you get out of his contract after next season being the 2027 season, so the season after next, the out shows here having it up 2.4 dead cap. Like, okay, that's wipe off the rear end area, put it aside if you don't want to move forward with him and move on with your life. There are way worse dead cap numbers that could be there for someone that you just recently signed to an extension for that you absolutely do not need to hitch your wagon to it. You absolutely do not need to feel like you need to make him work. If he does work out, it's just added bonus. That's all that will feel like. But all the other outlying names, yes, the overall thought of where you're bringing this point up, I think is absolutely valid. You are bringing in DCs that it's like, hey, we have these core individuals that for financial reasons, for draft reasons, whatever it is, these guys need to be able to work now because we are still in, let's not forget, a winning window. You have 17 at quarterback. You expect to get over the hump. You fired your coach to have this new coach because you're not able to get to a Super Bowl. So you need to be doing that sooner rather than later. What will this defensive coordinator do with the current players on the roster that you feel are valuable enough now and in the future that he can make it work? And I think the list that you brought up is very much valid, and you wouldn't sign off on a defensive coordinator if he felt, I don't know how I'm going to use Ed Oliver. I don't know how I'm going to use Max Harrison. I don't know how I'm going to use a Cole Bishop. This guy has to probably understand exactly what he can do for those guys and put them in positions to succeed. And then on top of it, maybe find diamonds in the rough that are, again, a Dorian Williams, or, maybe I can get something out of a Landon Jackson, a Javon Solomon, whatever it is that felt like they weren't necessarily being used in their best capabilities up until this point. That a few free agent signings coming in, all of a sudden you've reshuffled the deck entirely with this defense in the sense of results. But actually the personnel is very similar to what was there with the McDermott regime. So I think that all makes total sense. And I'm honestly very excited to see what the Jim Leonhard effect will do to a lot of the guys in the building already, because, the common theme, it felt like for a lot of guys, where untapped potential, and they're not in the position that it feels like they absolutely need to be in order to succeed. Maybe this change in philosophical idea of where this defense can go will untap that unproven potential from these guys in house.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm most excited too, is I think it's so easy to think who won't fit, but then you start looking at guys like Dwayne Carter, Javon Solomon, guys that you've kind of already written off, maybe in some cases Landon Jackson, Joe Andreessen, who knows? I would be a little surprised there, but maybe. You start looking at guys that you'd kind of given up on, thinking maybe this is a breath of fresh air for their career arc. Dwayne Carter was a 3rd-round pick. So, and he was thought of highly in that draft class. So if the Bills can somehow recoup, what's that?
4th-round pick.
He was 3rd, wasn't he?
I'm pretty sure he was the 4th.
Carter was 3rd and Bishop was 2nd that year.
Dwayne Carter.
You're getting Deion Walker.
Yep.
Deion Walker is certainly going to be important. He's core.
I honestly forget about Dwayne Carter being a thing, but yes, yeah. Dwayne Carter. I was half listening, and when you said, "Yep, nope, disregard." Continue.
I'm with you. I already have in mind a couple players that I think are really going to benefit from this change. The first one to come to mind, Luka, is one you already brought up, Dorian Williams. When you look at what's expected as a quote-unquote inside backer in a 3-4 scheme, now look, this is oversimplifying it. A lot of it is again, oversimplifying it. One of your inside backers drops back, coverage, roam around, cover. That to me sounds like Terrell Bernard. Mm-hmm. The other one is play forward, stop the run, blitz. We learned a lot about Dorian Williams this year. I think we learned he is very good playing forward, not just in run stopping, but in his ability to blitz. It was an underrated ability that Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich unlocked in him, and he really filled that Michael Hoyt role. I think the Bills missed him big time in that game in Denver when he got injured on the opening kickoff. And that sounds like a perfect role for him. I would not be stunned. In fact, I might predict that when the starters are announced week 1 for the Bills, Dorian Williams is one of your starting inside backers right next to Terrell Bernard. We don't know what they're going to do in the draft, obviously. I also think there's a chance, assuming he can get back to full speed, that this is a system upgrade for Terrell Bernard. Ask him to do less, not play as far forward, because it's almost like if you could combine Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams, you'd have the perfect backer. But I think we've started to learn now with Terrell Bernard, when he's back in coverage, man, he's a playmaker. When he's playing forward, holy cow, does he make you miss almost any linebacker of Bills past. There were times I watched him, I'm like, wow, Preston Brown would have made that play. But those are just a couple of guys. And, Luka, we have all off season to learn more about what the Bills are going to do. We certainly will get into that in this show. But before we get out of here, any other players on defense that you can think of, or really, I know Dorian Williams is one we talked about off the air. Anybody else that you think will factor in here? Or do you want to hit on the point that people might be wondering? I didn't include Taron Johnson on the list of players that are pivotal, and maybe you can pick up on why Taron Johnson wouldn't be in those conversations.
The name that is just circled in my head. It's bold, underlined, italic, everything about it highlighted. Where in the world does Taron Johnson fit in this? And or what do you do with that? I mean, Taron Johnson is the absolute odd man out in this situation here. And I will just say it politely. I welcome this. I think Taron Johnson was an absolute warrior and fit perfectly for everything that he needed to do while here in the McDermott era. And it just feels so perfect that, for unfortunate reasons of not getting to where we needed to go, Sean McDermott is gone. And it's at the same time that we sat there all season wondering if we finally needed to explore life after Taron Johnson, because the reality of the situation now is, yes, life needs to move on post Taron Johnson, and Taron Johnson needs to go find employment elsewhere. Loved him for everything he did once again. And I thought, obviously, at his best, he was he was an incredible asset to have on defense. Like, at his best, he was everything you wanted out of a nickel, both in the run game as well as the pass game. He did things that allowed you to be very, very unique and allow you to do things expansively, to not sacrifice size for the run game, sacrifice size for the pass game, but then also have that size or capability to defend the run because of him being there. It doesn't feel like a fit for what we need moving forward. It will be very, very intriguing. I know the hilarious thing about Taron Johnson is his contract was reshuffled around a little bit where the money is right before the deadline, for then no moves to be made. So now you're kind of in this awkward position with him financially that I don't think it's something that you can't move on from, but it's less advantageous than where it could have been if you didn't do what you did with him before the deadline. But all in all, he is absolutely the name where it's like, if there's one player on this current roster that I go, this individual has no fit in anything most likely we're going to be doing moving forward, it is 1000% Taron Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think we saw a decline in his coverage ability the last couple of years, and he was still able to be on the field because his run support as a DB was still very high, but then that took a huge dip this year too. Yeah. And then when you just look at what the Broncos did in nickel with Jaquan McMillan, he's a smaller guy, he's a faster guy, he's much more of a coverage guy, and that is just not where Taron Johnson is. You wonder if the Bills could trade him to a team like Green Bay, who needs secondary help. They just hired Bobby Babich as an assistant coach. Like, he would know the system. Perhaps, another team, maybe the Seahawks. I mean, they don't need any help at nickel for sure. But, Leslie Frazier's there. That wouldn't make a lot of sense because of where they're at with nickel. But Taron Johnson, I think, is just one of those guys that is going to be a fish out of water in this scheme. To Luka's point, unless you can find a trade partner, you're pretty much, if you get rid of him this year, it's more of you're freeing up the roster space, but you're not freeing up much cap space. But still, for player development and for scheme development, that might make it totally worth it. All right, well, hopefully you all enjoyed this episode. We broke down the Bills' new coaching staff. Other moves are still going to happen as they fill out assistant coaches along the way. And Luka and I will be back to talk about it. But Luka, as we move forward here, the next time we talk, the Super Bowl will be in the rearview mirror, which means we have other episodes to get to. We're going to go back and look at lessons learned from this past season. How did the rookies do this year? And, the thing about the Bills making these deep playoff runs is the combine is right around the corner, which means it's never too early to start draft prep. And what kind of class is this? Where are the Bills' needs going to be at now that we know who the defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator is? What kind of investments can we expect? I just remembered I was going to give you a stat that should make people feel encouraged about the wide receiver. So I'll do it real quick. If the Bills are trying to emulate the Sean Payton model, Sean Payton has been in Denver for 3 seasons. They have used 3 top 102 picks on receivers. You have to stretch it to 2 to get Troy Franklin, but they've done it on Marvin Mims Jr., Pat Bryant, and Troy Franklin. In Brandon Beane's entire tenure as Buffalo Bills GM since 2018, they have used 1 top 100 pick on receiver, and that was Keon Coleman. So I would expect that to change, but either way. Luka, this was fun. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Nope. I very much look forward to yet another offseason of discussing receiving targets, what we can do to shake up that room. And I will just say, as we sit here on February 1st, we will be one of the many people beating that drum of, can we please, for the love of God, improve this receiver room?
Improve the receiver room. Can we get some pass rush? Boy, oh boy, it feels like we could just copy and paste some off-season shows for the last 3 years. But we won't do that. We'll be here live or recorded, whatever way, whether it's Spotify. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We'd appreciate that. Like and subscribe anywhere you're listening or viewing. If you like what we do, we appreciate you all too. This has definitely been our biggest year of growth. We feel the love coming from you guys, and we are very appreciative of that. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We will talk to you next time on Bills Chat.